Welcome. My name is Penny Rosema. You are listening to the Cookware Manufacturers Association podcast. Now, one of the CMA goals is to keep our members informed. In this podcast, we have expert Heather Lutze. You'll recognize the name because she was one of our keynote speakers at the CMA Fall Conference back in September. Heather is the author of Marketing Espionage: How to Spy on Yourself, Your Prospects, and Your Competitors to dominate online. And today we're following up on that conversation from September with some highlights, key points from that presentation. Now you can find more information about Heather at findability.com. Hello, Heather, and welcome to our podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
It's great to talk to you again. Now, when you joined us in September, we had some great conversation about the challenges faced by many retailers in understanding SEO, search engine optimization, and understanding customers' path to purchase. You have written a book on just the same topic. So tell us, what inspired you to write on this topic and how you became to be an SEO expert?
What inspired me, I think, was I used to work for Yahoo Search Marketing. I started my career with Yahoo. Some of you might remember them. They were a big deal when I worked for them. Not so much anymore. We don't Yahoo it, right? We Google it. So unfortunately, that didn't really work out the way we'd hoped. But during that time, I worked with thousands of techies, people that would show up to these Yahoo events and really want to stump the speaker. So needless to say, I have really good training on what techies wanted versus what the business owner's outcome and what they wanted and what the disconnect was between the two. A lot of CEOs, I am one, I just happen to know the techie language within my industry, but a lot of CEOs, for the first time in their life, do not understand anything about this topic. And they end up making lots of mistakes. They end up not knowing who to trust. They sometimes, I think, easily get taken by not understanding the lingo or how to assess if that vendor really knows what they're doing. So, long story short, 13 years later, after owning my own search marketing company and writing my third book, this book I think I'm most proud of because I think it really distills all of the misunderstandings around search marketing. And after doing, 150 CEO presentations for a number of different organizations, this is really the distillation of all of the misunderstandings and the questions I received from executives around findability, or SEO, search engine optimization. I really hate that word, honestly, because it's riddled with misunderstanding. And I like findability because it's all-inclusive of a holistic strategy online.
All right, I'm going to use that term then through the rest of this podcast. What I really liked about your book, just a general comment, is that it's an easy read and the checklist at the end of each chapter. So you can kind of jump around a little bit, but the information in the step-by-step processes is very, very valuable. Let's talk about those most common mistakes. Are there 2 or 3 that, hit the top of the list for findability mistakes?
So many. How do I pick 2? Probably the number one is you've built a website that is truly a sales brochure. It is, your top-level navigation looks like about us, services, testimonials, contact us. And maybe you have a big sweeping graphic in the front. You have very little content on the homepage, and you pay a lot of money for that look and feel. And you're very proud of it. But then at the end of the day, it doesn't produce any additional business. And you get frustrated because you really spent a lot of time and effort making sure that website looked beautiful. And the bottom line is that, Google and search engines do not want to index sales brochures. They want to index thought leadership. They want to index people who know their stuff. And so there's a real disconnect for a lot of business owners around the look and feel and the findability or what it is you know. So that's probably one of the biggest universal problems that I get calls from is we spent a lot of money. I had a client recently said they spent $100,000 on a website that is completely unfindable because we get so wrapped up in the look and feel that we forget about what we're really trying to prove online as an expert in our space. So that's probably the first one.
That's a big one.
It is a big one, and I could talk about that for hours. But I think that we as business leaders need to evolve, right? We've got to be able to look past what the vendors in our life say we should do and say, what are we trying to achieve? How do we build a fan base online that respects what we know and looks to us for guidance? And we're not here to sell. We are here to inform and educate and help people through their path. And we hope somewhere along that path that they choose us to work with, or they see us as an ongoing resource. But no one wants to talk to a salesperson. Nobody. And I think we lose sight of that. Sorry, salespeople, but we're not ready when we're ready when we're ready, right?
Right, and that might not be at that first Google. And so let's talk a little bit about the all-knowing Google. How to leverage that knowledge. What you led to that a little bit in this previous conversation, this previous question here. What is it about this all-knowing Google and how they leverage it?
Great question. Well, I always like to take my customers back to the very beginning and kind of ask them to get rid of all their ideas of why they think websites rank. And let's take you all the way back to the very beginning. Larry Page and Sergey Brin were finishing up their final work on the Stanford campus. And their professors challenged them on a couple levels. They said, look, for your final doctoral thesis, we want you to build something that you're frustrated about and also that solves a real problem on the Stanford campus. And what they did is they said, look, we know there's this tremendous amount of content coming out of professors and students on the Stanford campus. But we have to wait for years, and not all of that gets published and put in the library. So that vacuum of content was really frustrating to Larry and Sergey. So what they decided to do is build a database that bridges that gap. And we only want to index content from thought leaders, from professors. I don't know, Penny, have you ever heard of the concept of publish or perish?
No.
So publish and perish is kind of the thing where if you are a college professor, you must publish, or you perish, meaning you're out the door, because we only want the most learned, up-to-date professors. And would you really want to take a class from a professor who hadn't updated his work in 3 years? So let's fast forward to websites, right? Websites they're term papers, they're professorship content. And everyone in your organization is a professor in their respective fields. The websites are intended to reflect that knowledge, that professorship, in every single form and function. Whether it's your pages on your site, whether it's your blog post, whether it's your social engagement, it all lends to who you are and what you know and why we should trust you. And Google's most valued asset is going to be their search results. So if you had to choose between an out-of-date professor, a website that had not been updated for 3 years or longer, had no blog and no social engagement, and then you look at another website where they update their content all the time, they're very engaged in social media, who would you pick to be on the homepage of your search results?
Right.
So Google really is not the bad boogeyman that a lot of people think it is. It is based on, have you earned it? Are you up to date? And do you know your stuff? And if you plan your architecture and your website around this concept, you will be heads and tails above your competitors online.
I like something that you talk about on page 8 of your book. Google is like dating service that creates the perfect match. And that, I think, kind of leads to what you're talking about here. Make sure that you're giving them the information that they want, and then let Google match them up.
Right. We are going on dating experiences, I like to think of, in search results. And Google's like the Match.com of search, right? I mean, he has to look at all these different profiles, all these websites, and decide who's the best match for that particular criteria. And they call that the Google algorithm, right? So the algorithm has a lot of mystique and has a lot of misunderstanding. But at the end of the day, they're just trying to evaluate who is the most learned, up-to-date professor in that respective keyword, in that one keyword phrase.
And you've done a
Who is the most learned professor?
Yeah, you did a nice job in your book, up through chapter 3, talking about how to get better at, leveraging that Google information. In chapter 4, you
Right.
talk about identifying your ideal customer. And I can't believe
Hmm.
people haven't heard it before. In your book, you did a nice job of a step-by-step process. My question
Yeah.
is, in your experience, is this a step organizations like to skip? It's complicated. It's work.
Yeah,
Or
I mean, so much of, go ahead, Penny, I'm sorry.
well, I just wondered what your experience was if they push back on you when you work with organizations, or do they seem to get it? I'm
Uh-huh.
not sure where they're at.
No, they don't get it. They don't get it. And they want to go to a pretty brochure as
Mm.
quickly as humanly possible. And they jump right into the design, and the board of directors argue about where the placement of the logo or the phone number, or do we choose cerulean blue or baby blue for the homepage. And there's all these very, very interesting conversations that happen. All of the findability, the path to purchase, identifying your ideal prospect happens before you ever go to design. And I think a lot of people are like, what? Isn't that what we just put in the content after we launched the look and feel? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, no, no. The thought leadership, what the prospects are searching for, what they want, what makes them tick, what frustrates them, is how we build our website architecture, right? It's how we wrap. So the look and feel is like a gift wrap, right? You gift wrap it, you make it look pretty. But inside that gift has to be a wealth of knowledge that is connected with what people want. And it has to hit them along each of their elements for path to purchase. So we like to call it informational, shopping, and buying. So that's everyone's path to purchase. Informational, you maybe go to Amazon and you start looking at coffee pots. You're not really sure what you want. Do you want a French press? Do you want a Keurig? Do you want a regular old school? And then you go, no. I want a French press coffee maker. And so now you're in your shopping. So now you go to Google and you type in silver, right? French press. And then you see all of your options, and you start looking at reviews, and then you start reading the descriptions, and you go deeper into that concept. Then when you're ready and you decided, I'm going to get a Bodum French press, silver, insulated, right, French press, that is the buying. That is where the wallets are out on the table and they're ready to make a purchase. So we need to feed our guests, right, our visitors, in all those respective levels, information, shopping, and buying. And ultimately, the buying is really what we're looking for. But we need to do a little wooing along the way.
I gotcha. Chapter 8 of your book, and I'm kind of skipping ahead on chapters here. There's just so much information there that's so valuable. But there was one other
Yeah.
section that I thought listeners, if they haven't opened the book or reviewed their notes since the conference that we had last September, chapter 8 talks about the keyword map. And again, you did a great job with some step-by-step processes and some examples. It looks overwhelming. Why is it so important?
Well, it's not meant to be overwhelming. I mean, if you look, like I'm on page 132 or 133, and if you think about a website, okay, you don't just look at the homepage. That's what we see as visitors, right? We come into the homepage, and then we decide where we're going to go from there. Google doesn't see it. I always think like to see a website is like an old tree, right? There's this huge trunk, but underneath there, the root system is incredibly deep. And that's what makes the tree strong and healthy. So think of a website like a tree and all the roots underneath it. So when you look at these sitemaps, we call these keyword blueprints or keyword roadmaps, you'll see that the homepage is all about what is your professorship about. That starts the conversation, okay? Now, when you look at your top-level navigation of your website, you can then see that we've got a whole series of thought leadership concepts. In SEO, we call them silos. Oftentimes, I will refer them to chapters of a book, right?
Okay.
Your home page is the cover of the book. Open up the book, and you see the table of contents. The table of contents is your top-level navigation. That's what you're a professor in. And then if I turn to one of these respective chapters, then I'm going to get all the connected content within that chapter. That would make sense. That's what I would expect when I turn to that chapter. So think of it as where you are building a professorship piece of work whether that be a book, a term paper. You have to organize it or you're not going to get your A+.
Right.
And I was always, I was a very learned and happy student. I loved being at school. And I always wanted the A+, right? I'd go to the after hours, and I would sit in the front row, and, I'd make sure I had the beautiful cover on the front of my term papers. You have to think about that sort of mentality, right? If you want an A+, you want to rank for all these different keyword phrases, you have to be thinking about, how do I prove that to my professor? And the professor is Google.
Mm-hmm. Heather, I can't tell you how much we appreciate our conversations. We're talking with search engine optimization or findability expert, Heather Lutze. Heather, thank you for sharing your time and all these valuable tips. Any final words of advice? If people are feeling a little bit overwhelming and they haven't quite flipped open their book since the conference, what would you basic words of advice be?
Well, I think that, first of all, you need to start with the end in mind, and I think that's been said a lot. I get that. But remember, we're not salespeople, right? We are thought leaders, and don't forget that. And if you're not blogging, if you're not socially engaged, take a look at what that might look like to Google. And maybe if you were more up to date, if you were more learned, more published, you would be more findable. And that's, at the end of the day, what makes search engine optimization or findability really work. Okay, and understanding that there is a process, and it's only your responsibility to understand the structure of that process. You don't have to understand all the details. I just want you to skim through the book and look at. There's a chapter called How to Hire and Fire a Webmaster or a Web Designer. Your job is to be able to guide them and to understand when they go off the path and when they're exactly aligned with you. So just remember that you don't have to be a nerd. No pocket protector required. You just need to be responsible for your part in that relationship. And what do you need to know to have a successful website long term?
Excellent words of advice. My name is Penny Rosema, and we're recording for the Cookware Manufacturers Association. Again, if you'd like more information about Heather, please check out her website, findability.com. If you were at the fall conference, pull out that book and flip through a couple of chapters. I think you'll find it very, very well worth your time. And we need your feedback so we can continue to keep you informed. Was this audio interview valuable to you? Do you have questions or topics you'd like to suggest for future interviews? Let us know. You can email me at prosema@cookware.org. You'll find this podcast and others in the member section of cookware.org website. Look for the CMA podcast link. Thank you, Heather, for joining us today. It was a great conversation. Enjoy the day.